Should you be thinking about buying the Sony ZV-E10, or should you be hanging on for this new secret rumored camera from Sony, which is coming in the next 2 weeks? It's called the Sony ZV-E1. First up, this new Sony ZV-E1 is based off the Sony a7S III, and loosely you could say it's based off the Sony FX3. By that standard alone, we know that this new Sony ZV-E1 could be a serious heavy hitter. Now, there's one big difference between the Sony ZV-E1 and the Sony ZV-E10, and that is, if the rumors are true, the Sony ZV-E1 is a full frame camera, while this little monster is just APS-C. What's the difference? Full frame look probably means nothing to a lot of people unless you're a real aficionado. I want my full frame look. But what it does mean is that because, if the rumors are to be true again, it's a 12 megapixel camera, that means on a full frame sensor, this thing could be a low light beast. This is not a 12 megapixel sensor, so essentially the more megapixels you have on a sensor, the smaller the pixels are, and the smaller they are, yeah, that means they have a lot of trouble sucking in a lot of light. So the bigger the pixel, the more light it can pull in. So the Sony ZV-E1 with a full frame sensor, this thing could be an absolute low light monster. Where else does it differ? Well, obviously from what we know, this is going to shoot 4K 60, which you're thinking, 4K 60? My dog's phone from like 1963 could shoot 4K 60. Bit of an extreme exaggeration, but you get the point. So Sony have always been slow to bring 4K 60 to the smaller cameras. However, 4K 60 could be coming to the Sony ZV-E1. Do you get 4K 60 in this? No, you don't. But you do get 1080 120, which means you have 120 frames per second. And on this camera, it's really clean, it's really usable, and it's really damn good. However, apparently, and I find this really hard to believe, 4K 120 is going to come via a firmware update to the Sony ZV-E1. Maybe, possibly, it will. Nobody knows. That's a substantial firmware update to bring 4K 120 to a camera that apparently could be a similar size to the Sony a7C. Personally, I can't see that happening. Simply because why would you not have 4K 120 as a big, huge selling point? I think it is an absolute huge selling point for those who want to use it. Everybody else are like, oh, whatever. I think it should either come with 4K 120 out of the box or it doesn't. Now, keep in mind, you should never buy anything on the promise, oh, we will release that. Some of the other rumors on the Sony ZV-E1, and apparently all of these are more or less confirmed, this thing is not going to have pixel binning, which, depending on what way you lie, could be a good thing or a bad thing. Pixel binning essentially puts a whole bunch of pixels together that are side by side to make one big pixel from 4 smaller pixels. So it's not going to have any pixel binning, which might have been an advantage in low light, but that's a good sign, I think, that it's going to be 12 megapixel sensor, 4 full frame monster sensor, low light beast. Again, that could be the big thing here for this Sony ZV-E1. Everybody's been hearing about AI for the last while, and AI is something that's going to be in the Sony ZV-E1 in a big way. Now, how they're going to put this into the Sony ZV-E1, I have absolutely no idea, because already in a lot of Sony cameras there is some degree of artificial intelligence when it comes to the autofocus systems. So what else is it going to do in that sense? Are we going to get a kind of a, and I don't know why this would be, but are we going to get something like that iPhone or Android fake blurry background kind of thing? Just leave the lens do that. That's what it's for. So maybe the autofocus will get better. To be honest, I'm not sure how it can get better, because right now Sony autofocus is probably some of the best on the planet. And speaking of autofocus, the rumors say that the autofocus in the Sony ZV-E1 is coming from the A7R4, but it's going to be better. So that's probably the artificial intelligence bringing in its heavy lifting. We don't know a lot about what the body is going to look like. Apparently it's going to be similar to the Sony ZV-E10, but closer in size to the A7C, and it's going to have some features from the Sony FX3 as well. I mean, that's real clutching at straws from Sony Alpha rumors, but whatever. I like the site. I spend way too much time on there nosing through their good and bad and crazy rumors, but nonetheless, that's what you're looking at. Now, here's the other thing. The cost of this, we don't know, but you're looking at maybe $2,000 to $3,000 for a full frame vlogging camera. There's no way they're going to do this for less than $2,000. Might be wrong, but I cannot see it happening. So this is less than $1,000. Should you save your money and buy one of these, or should you get the full frame thing? Now, here's the thing. Here's the real kind of food for thought that people have to ask themselves. Having a new camera isn't going to make better content. I don't care. Look, gear is really important in the current YouTube climate, or anywhere. The better gear you have, the better your stuff looks, provided you spend a lot of time in digging into the settings in the camera and figuring out how to use it. Now, it's not going to make a difference. So unless there's a real specific need for you to want 4K 120, if it comes via firmware, which I doubt, then maybe that's the camera for you, but you need a really specific reason. Maybe you want 4K 60, which is a bit dated at this stage for a Sony camera at this price point, but nonetheless, is that what you want, 4K 60? Maybe they'll do 1080 240, who knows, probably be 1080 120. This isn't a revolutionary camera that's suddenly going to make all your stuff look like a James Cameron movie. No, the camera is always just a tool to tell the story. So it's not going to make better stories. It's really, I mean, look, if it looks as good as this, or if it looks as good as something on your phone with a little bit more of that kind of mirrorless vibe, that proper camera look, then great. It's not going to be revolutionary. I think that while this is going to be announced by all accounts at 3 p.m. GMT, which is 10 a.m. EST on March 29th, if the rumors are to be believed, then maybe this is the camera for you. But I think there's a lot of cameras out there right now that you absolutely should be looking at instead of going, the Sony ZV-E1. That's the camera I need to get. Because most people have got that shiny new toy syndrome, and I'll be honest, I'm guilty as charged on shiny new toy syndrome. But once you get it into your head that the camera is only a tool and a relatively newer camera isn't going to be an evolutionary bound and leap and jump and all those other words from currently what you are using, then serious food for thought. But it's always exciting to see a new camera. I mean, look, the Sony ZV-E10 is a great camera. It's powerful. The stabilization absolutely sucks. If they had just the ZV-E11 with better stabilization, I'd be happy. But maybe you do want to live in hope for that 4K 120 that'll come via firmware update. I could well be eating a hat in a couple of months, but whatever. So that's what's going on with the Sony ZV-E1. Would I buy it? Probably not. However, for a full frame look, which is something that a lot of people like, and you do get more depth of field because the sensor is bigger, you do get more blur on your blurry background. But realistically, between that and like this and a fast lens, your audience probably couldn't give a blind badger's left arse cheek. And that's been brutally honest about it. If you want to see what this camera can actually do, and maybe go, maybe I should get the Sony ZV-E10, check out this video here. The whole thing was shot on this bad boy.